All right, great to see everybody this morning. We have an excellent crowd. We're glad you're all here. I did put a new series of sheets on the table, and this is going to be for our brand new study starting next week. And so if you want to grab a copy of those, you are welcome to do that now. There's two separate pages on the back. One is an outline of the book of Philippians that we're going to study, and the other is an introductory page because our very first lesson is an introduction to the book. And so I want to explain where we're heading with the notes next week so you know what we're looking for and what we hope to discuss in class next week. So the first one looks like this. It's going to be an outline. It's going to have sort of a breakdown of what we're looking at in each of our lessons. And then the second one is just we do a discussion question page, and we have a number of questions. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. Just real quick about the breakdown of the book and then where we're heading in our notes next week. So I'll let everybody that wants a copy can grab a copy, and we'll let everybody get settled, and then I'll discuss this real quick. If you don't get it before class, be sure to get it after class so you don't forget to grab a copy of the book of Philippians. We have just a few things left in Genesis this morning from our study in the life of Noah. We're going to finish that up real quickly. But before I do that, I want to talk about where we're going next week. Again, there's two separate pages. The front side only. One is an outline of the book, like a cover page, and the second one is our notes for lesson number 1. Okay, so we're finishing up our study in Noah today, which means we've got something to do next week, brand new, and there have been several suggestions, but I had a couple for one of the shorter epistles of Paul. We had a suggestion for Philippians, and so that's what we're going to study, the book of Philippians, and we're going to sort of follow the outline on this page. Now, just because we have 13 separate entries for lessons, we have 13 lessons designated, it doesn't mean it will take us necessarily 13 weeks. There might be some weeks where it takes us a week or two to get through a lesson, just like it does every lesson. But one thing I love about the suggestion of a shorter book, like we did with Noah, we get a little bit more chance to really explore a shorter amount of verses. For example, in lesson number 2, we're covering verses 1 through 11. That's what Paul basically has a prayer for the people in Philippi. And so we get a chance to sort of slow down and really examine the language and some of the lessons we learn out of that. And we hope to do that with all 13 lessons. It's not a very long book. There's only 4 chapters, and the chapters aren't long themselves. So we'll get a chance to really examine what Paul is talking about in the book. And next week we're going to be talking about or going through the introduction to the book. And we basically have 3 questions. Now, if you can connect this to what we covered in the How to Study the Bible class, we want to know something about the background. So first question is, what do we know about the church in Philippi? So Paul's writing a letter to these people. Do we know how they started? Do we know any of the members by name? And we're going to focus on Acts chapter 16. So I'd spend a lot of time reading Acts chapter 16, and we're going to talk about how the church started. What do we know about the church? Do we know anything about the growth of the church in Philippi before the letter starts to us in the Bible? And then the second one is, do we know when the letter was written? Is there anything in the text that would indicate when the letter was written? And in chapter 1 of Philippians, there's a couple of allusions to some historical things that might help us to date the book. And then finally, before we ever get into the book, what are your impressions of it? What are your overall impressions of Philippians? What do you think the theme is? Maybe, since it's 4 chapters, before next week, maybe sort of answer your preliminary thoughts. And then having done so, what do you think is the theme of the book? What do you think is the overall aim of the book? What's it trying to do? And then what major doctrines do you think Paul is emphasizing in the book? It's a fantastic book. It really is a great, great book just like all books of the Bible are, but Philippians is a wonderful book, and I don't know anybody that's ever studied the book that hasn't come away very encouraged by the book, because it's a very uplifting book. It challenges us to be strong thinkers, to have strong minds. So I'm really excited. I think it was a great suggestion, and I'm happy that you presented that, the several of you that had suggestions like it, and then the suggestion of Philippians. Okay, so let's finish our Genesis class on the life of Noah today. Now, we didn't study the entire book, only the life of Noah. So we're finishing up our thoughts on chapter 9 this morning. So turn to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9. We had a great discussion last week on Noah's drunkenness and what Ham did and what Canaan potentially did. And today we get to finish up with essentially verses 26 and 27, the question about Shem and Japheth. So the Bible says, he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And may God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Noah lived after the flood 350 years, so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So the last question in that section of notes was this: what happens to Shem and Japheth, and why is it important? What were your thoughts on that? It may seem like a really simple sort of maybe like a veiled reference in verse 26 and 27 about what's going to potentially happen to the sons, but there's something that we cannot forget. What's the important part of these two verses? What is it? Okay. Where is Christ in all this? Because remember, back in Genesis 3:15, God said, "I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman, between her seed and your seed. You'll bruise his head, or you'll bruise his heel, but he'll crush your head." And from that moment, there was a seed promise. And the Bible's been unfolding and developing through that seed promise. And then the flood happens. And it's easy to forget that the seed promise is still going on because, you know, we had this major cataclysmic event, this worldwide event, and it would be easy to focus on the flood of waters and the destruction of the people, and you're focused on Noah, and we talked about his character, and we've talked about things of Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, and the wife of Noah, and we've talked about all that, and it would be easy to forget that God has still not forgotten the seed promise. So the question is, through whom is that going to be continued? Which of the two sons here? Shem or Japheth? It looks like it's going to be Shem. All right. When it says in verse 26, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem," or it might be properly phrased, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem," what does that tell you about Shem? What's his character like? I think he's a righteous man. And you get a sense of that in the previous instance when Ham goes in and sees his father and apparently goes out and reviles his father and makes fun of him. And Japheth and Shem take the blanket and they walk backward. They wouldn't even look at the nakedness of their father, and they covered him. It gives us a sense that they have some integrity. But here when it says Lord God of Shem and that Canaan would be his servant, we get a sense that he's obviously a very pious man. And it's interesting because it says the Lord, the God of Shem. It's very personal in the way that's written. Shem would likely say, he is my God, in the sense that the psalmist would do the same. The Lord is my shepherd. Shem is the ancestor of the Jewish people. So if you follow the line out, it all goes back to Shem, and Canaan would be his servant. So the seed line would continue through Shem, and none of Canaan's descendants would be able to stop what God was going to do through this line of people. So it restarts here. The promise is it's continuing its development, but it does so through Shem. Japheth is a little different. I don't know if you did any study on verse 27, but it says, "May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." What do you think about that phrase, "he will enlarge Japheth"? Do you do any study on that? Any thoughts on it? Okay, it could be territorial. There's no question that they would expand out and the territory would be great, because the word enlarge means to make room for the one who spreads abroad. Some think this may have reference to the descendants, which would include the land. I would agree with that, Philip, that his descendants would be many. But here's an interesting thing. Some take the Hebrew word here that's used to refer to intellectual abilities, that there would be an advancement or an enlargement of their intellectual abilities, which would mean that while Shem would have the spiritual development, that Japheth would perhaps be in the physical, what Shem would be in the spiritual. I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting to think about perhaps that maybe this is technological and intellectual development perhaps could be indicated through Japheth. He talks about the tents of Shem here. The antecedent to that, though, is God. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he, I think that's God, dwell in the tents of Shem, meaning that God dwells in the tents of Shem to have fellowship with him, like Psalm 84 and verse 10 talks about. There's nothing really hard here at the end of this story. What it talks about, the development of the line, and then Noah living 350 years after that. So all the days of Noah were 950 years. Because remember, the flood happened in the 600th year of his life. What I would say here is there is a tendency on the part of some to believe that when he talks about the curse of Canaan and the blessing on Shem and God enlarging Japheth, that there are people who think that that there are three races of people that came out of this. What are your thoughts on that? And they say this because they will say that the cursing of Canaan is that God made him black, and that was the curse. You think that's true? 100% no. Absolutely not. Yeah, it's just not there. And it's a catalyst for all kinds of problems, right? Where in the world, though, would all the variations of skin color come from? Where would that even be? Okay, I know God confounded languages at Babel. If Adam and Eve were the first human beings, and God made them, and Eve was the mother of all, she was the mother of all, and you're going back to the potentiality of reproducing all of the world. What was inherent within Adam and Eve? The races. And it all goes back to Adam and Eve. We all come from one blood according to Acts chapter 20. When you go to Acts chapter 17, look at verse 22 beginning. So if you go back to Adam and Eve, inherent within Adam and Eve is the ability to produce all different kinds of people to come following from them, right? So races of people would have come from that. Now, it gets narrowed again because you go back to Noah and his sons. But from Noah and his sons, what would happen from them? All kinds of races of people. And then, Philip, I don't doubt at all that when you look at Babel and you have the splitting up of the earth, that we have the ability. There is such a thing as macroevolution. You can have a change within a kind as you adapt to your environment. We just don't have change from one kind to another. But I believe that God posited within, beginning with Adam and Eve, and it would certainly have been there at first with everybody, that because of, you go back and you go back to pure DNA, back at the very beginning, there would have been the ability to produce all kinds of races back then. I do not believe, I'm adamantly in saying in verse 25 that the cursing on Canaan was not that he made him black. Would that potentially cause civil strife to advance something like that? Yeah, I just think it's problematic. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. You acclimated to it, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They even vote different than the way the people in New Jersey vote, too. It's weird. It's weird how that happens. I don't know. Yeah. But I just think that's it. That's the answer. And I only brought that out because it's wearisome to read articles where people erroneously saying, I think Joel's right, just show us in the Bible where that's at. Because to take this and say God was making three races of people, and from Canaan came darker skinned people, well, that's a cursing. God didn't do that. To be black skinned or dark skinned is not a curse. It's not a curse at all. Nor is it a cursing to be white. It's just there's the potentiality, as has been discussed, there's the potentiality always for variations within a kind. And that's what you see in the world. All right. And Babel would help explain a lot of that. Chapter 10, when you have the spreading out of the sons, and then you get to chapter 11, and then they get further spread out as the language is divided, then what Art was just talking about would invariably happen, that people start adapting to their environment. We do that. Okay, so with that said, now we just want to pull back away from the chapter 9 notes, away from chapter 7 notes, away from chapter 8 notes, and just sort of in sort of an overview way, talk about what we've learned in regard to Noah. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite part? What did you learn from Noah? Is there anything that you learned that you didn't know before about the story of Noah? Before we do that, though, I think sometimes we do forget the value of character studies in the Bible, to know about people in the Bible. It's easy to look at a statement, a requirement, or some prohibition, and then not do so much study of characters. And their character studies have tremendous value. One thing we would bring out is 2 Timothy chapter 3, 16 and 17. When the Bible says all Scripture is inspired of God, and at the end, when it talks about its profitability, it's profitable for doctrine, reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, is the inclusion of characters and the life of characters in the Bible, is that accidental on the part of God? Is there a value in character studies? What would be the value of studying someone in Scripture? Like, for example, Noah, we've just taken a look at his life. What's the value of that for us, practically for us? Yeah, Art? Sure. 100%. Yeah. One of the things that happens is we get to see what truth looks like in application, either by a person rejecting it or a person accepting it. All right, so they're good for our own personal growth and development, because human nature has never changed. What we're looking at when we see characters in the Bible is the way that they're reacting to the will of God. They dealt with the same issues. They dealt with the same problems. I mean, they might be cloaked differently today, but it's the same things. And we get to see how characters lived and reacted, and that helps us. It helps us make an application to take it and make it personal to us. Gloria? 100%. I think really the main thing is not the character itself, but the nature of God we get to see as He interacts with people. Because, we've done a study of the life of Noah, and it's been a great study. To have studied it this way has been so good for me, but I hope as a class. But I think I learned as much about God as I did about Noah, because what we've really watched is what God's been doing the whole time in this. So it really gives us insight into the nature of God. In fact, the text started that way. Before we ever get introduced to Noah, it introduced us to God, because it was God's reaction to a sinful world, and then Noah becomes part of the story. And those examples largely are authoritative, right? They become authoritative for us, because when you look at a person who is rebuked by God or approved by God, what it does is show us what to do or what not to do. Just like in 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 through 6, when it talks about the Israelites, it says these things happen to them as an example for us. And so what we have are examples and character studies, and Noah's been a really good one. Phil? Sure. Oh, no doubt. Yes.
And then we do something like that. We don't know what other bad example Noah was to his kids. Yeah. He could not have done something before.
I have no idea. Yeah, we certainly have to watch ourselves. Okay, so with that said, open it up now. For all the weeks that we've been studying the life of Noah, what do you appreciate about him? What have you learned about him? Did you learn something new that you didn't know about him before? What are we taking away from the lesson about Noah? Yeah, Gloria?
I think
Yeah.
And even though he had never seen it running,
Yep.
didn't know what was gonna happen, and yet God told him to build the ark. What is an ark, you know?
Yeah.
He didn't know what was gonna happen, but he trusted God to be telling him the truth.
Yeah. I think that's a great.
He failed to trust God, so to me, that's a good example.
Yeah. That's a great point, because I think sometimes we think of faith, the concept of faith, right? Faith is, you could go to Hebrews 11 and verse 1. It's the substructure of things that we've never seen, so it's belief in unseen things. But I think sometimes we think that faith involves understanding like somehow we've mechanically worked it all out in our mind, and now there is trust based on evidence, but somehow we've gotten to where we think we have to understand everything. It has to make sense to me always. And I think Noah's an excellent example that while faith is trusting that God is correct, and that's what Noah did, because did he understand rain? He didn't understand that. Had anybody ever before him built a huge flotation device that would ever rise above floodwaters? Nobody had ever done that before. But what did he know about God? What did he know for a fact about God? God was telling the truth, that God was right, and he trusted God, and that's what faith is. And so I think that's one of the takeaways has to be that he didn't understand it all, right? But he knew that it was right because God was saying it, and he trusted that what God was saying was true, and he acted upon that. So faith, according to Noah, is faith, believing of things not yet seen, and then moving on that. Carl? I think so. Yep. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We just know that there was a time frame in which they built it, and so close to a century, they could have done that, or they could have, I don't know how they did that exactly. I don't know how that all worked out, but close to a century. So there was commitment for sure, 100%. But I think he was all those things. He was a hard worker with intelligence and patience. I think that's one thing. That we learn from Noah. What Carl's talking about is that we should admire somebody for their hard work, their dedication to something, and I think we could admire Noah for that.
Well, the same type of trust and faith that Noah had,
Yep.
you see also in Abraham, because Abraham was
100%.
not everything,
He went out not knowing where he was going. Yeah.
not everything was explained to him,
Yep.
but yet he had enough trust in God and faith in God to do what God said.
100%. And I think we can take that same thing and move it today. If somebody, for example, we talked about in December how to become a Christian, hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized. Do you think a lot of people are caught up on baptism? In this world they are, right? A lot of people won't do it. And for a lot of them, they're like, well, I don't understand why God would want me to go. I don't even understand why he would want me to go down in water. Do we have to understand it mechanically in our mind? Do we have to what is my response? He said it, and I know it's right because he said to do it, so I'm just going to do it. And that's what Noah did. I don't know what rain is. I've never seen it before. I don't understand the mechanics of an ark, but God gave me the dimensions, and I'm going to build it that way. And Abraham did exactly the same thing. That's why he's such a good example. Anything else? What did you learn about Noah? Yeah, okay.
To me, one of the strongest lessons that I found here that applies to us today is in the face of so much that's going on in the world
Yep.
and the ridicule
Yes.
that he received,
Mm-hmm.
he had the strength to stand firm.
Yeah, I think that is to me also one of the things I took away from this, because we spent some time talking about the population. We talked about it just a tad, and there are some low estimates that put them into the hundreds of millions. But I think more correctly, if you add the long ages of the patriarchs, you're talking about a world population that was not very much unlike ours. You're talking anywhere from 5 to 7 billion people that lived back then in the world that God destroyed. And in a world of 5 billion or 6 billion or 7 billion people, how many people were doing the right thing? 8 people. Only 8 people in the whole world were doing the right thing. That's staggering. But it tells me you can do the right thing even when everybody else is doing the wrong thing. And that's some real strength and courage. And I think that's what I was impressed with a lot in this study, is that you can still do the right thing even if the whole world is doing the wrong thing. And I think sometimes we feel the pressure of being the standout, of being the oddball according to the world, and we give in just a tad because it's hard to be different from that. But we can do it because Noah did. Any other lessons? Yeah, Terry?
One thing, didn't think about it that much, the covenant that God made
Yeah.
with humankind
Yeah, that's right.
had to be with the animal kingdom as well,
Yeah, it did.
because all of that were innocent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that might be easy to miss, but we talked about that, where God made the covenant with Noah and his family, his sons, and with every living thing. Yeah, so it's a covenant to the whole entire living part of creation. What about Noah as a father? I think especially as someone with kids in the house right now, I think this hit me more than anything. What do you think about him as a father? Yes.
For them to follow him.
Yep.
So, it's hard to see that this day and time.
Yeah, I know.
As a
Yeah.
parent-child relationship, but, they were willing, and of course, they believed in God too,
Sure.
but evidently had a tremendous impact.
Must have had a huge impact. Joel, you had your hand slightly up there.
I was just thinking, and wondered that, in my mind, they helped Noah overall.
Yes.
Lord received his justice.
Yes.
So can you imagine the son who looks at the father, the ability, they don't know, they've never seen that like it, they've never seen rain, but yet their father got this from God, so God,
Yeah. 100%. In Hebrews 11:7, what does it say that Noah did for his family? He saved his family, right? So he saved his family. And like Joel's saying, they were participants in that. But Noah, being the patriarch, was the head of the household, and so he's the one who was responsible for that. And as a parent of kids who need wisdom and they need guidance as they grow, that's what hits me as we go through the story of Noah, because of all the things that I would be known for in this life, I want to number one be known for saving my family. That's what I want to be known for. If I give my kids every material good in the world, and I set them up to be physically successful, and I help them to be great financial managers, and I set them up with a job, and I get them a college education, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. If I fail to save them, then I really haven't helped them at all, because the most important thing is to save your family. And I think when you start the story of Noah and you go all the way through, I think that's the one constant thing, is that Noah, he was a great husband to his wife, but he was a great father to his kids, and so he saved his family, and that's what God gives him the credit for doing. That's the epitaph, in his memorial stone, is that he saved his family, and I think all of us should want to be that too. Any other lessons you've learned as we go through? Yes, Steve?
I think to maybe continue what Kay was saying a few moments ago, if you look at Noah and the ark, you kind of think of Christianity as a whole. Do we really know how wonderful heaven's going to be? But yet we have that promise.
Yeah.
And then you have a church in the world which, in a way, represents the ark. To me, it's
Sure.
a place of safety that
There's a parallel between it.
to something in the future that you really
Yeah.
aren't sure about.
Yeah. Just like the ark delivered them into something brand new, and the church does that today. In fact, 1 Corinthians 15:23 and 24, when the Lord returns, it'll be to deliver the kingdom to the fathers, right? So that's very, very similar in meaning. What Carl was saying about him being industrious, I think one of the things that impressed me so much as we went through was to talk about the amount of work that must have been involved and the amount of ingenuity that must have been involved. And Noah was brilliant, right? I know he was getting instruction from God, but Noah was brilliant. The way that they would have potentially done this was just unbelievable. And when you take great ideas or you have this ingenuity and you match it with hard work, you get amazing results. And I think if anything, we can learn from Noah that if you want to succeed in life, you've got to throw yourself into the project. You have to be industrious and work hard with intelligence and patience, and things will come out in the end. And I think, and I've thought about this a lot since then. I just jotted it down in my notes, and I don't even know how to express it well, but I just think, because we can't be 100% sure inside the mind of Noah, I think, but we did some best guessing, especially when the flood was occurring, right? In chapter 7 and chapter 8, when the rain was falling. And we were talking about, we've got to put ourselves in the shoes of Noah and think about from his perspective what he was hearing and what he was seeing. And you're talking about, it was worldwide destruction. It was every single human life outside of the ark and every single animal life outside the ark, minus the ones that were aquatic that could swim, right? But every single human life outside the ark. And to hear that taking place, to have witnessed, you exit off of the ark, there had to be still dead bodies floating in water. It was just, it's a traumatic thing, and there would be some PTSD likely to have come from that. And yet there's nothing about instability, because he must have committed all that to God. And Genesis 6 talks about how that God and Noah walked in fellowship with each other, and so there must have been a very strong relationship between them, to the point that just like with Enoch, they were, God was God and Noah was Noah, but they were also friends and they walked together. There was constant communication. And I just think when you're dealing with problems, communication with God is so important. It must have been for Noah too.
Yes, for 120 years, Noah preached.
Yes, he did.
And he had to be telling these folks, you've got to change or else.
Yeah,
Now, what about, like, in your case,
yeah,
you preached for all many years, and some people do not listen to what the Word says.
yeah.
How do you know,
It's disappointing when that happens. And it's disappointing for elders and other members.
it's not a surprising thing to some extent.
Yeah, it's not surprising. But it's still hard to deal with emotionally at times. And so that on top of worldwide destruction, Noah had a lot on him. He was an unbelievable character. So at the end of it, I know you get to that end, you got that weird story at the end in chapter 9, but in spite of that, is Noah someone that we should emulate? Should he be a Bible hero to us? He should be. He is a Bible hero. And he's somebody that we should tell our kids, be like Noah, right? Because you learn from Noah, obedience is doing everything God said. Be like Noah. Just do everything God tells you to do, and you're going to come out okay in the end. I think it's been a really good study. Any other thoughts? Any last thought before we end our study on Noah? It's been a really good thought. I saw Gloria's hand and Jean's.
If I can get it out. But one thing I had never thought about until this study was the comparison of the promise with the rainbow
Yes.
and the promise that we get of eternal life.
Sure.
Christ's death,
Yeah.
the memorial feast every Sunday.
Yeah.
We have that comparison that I had never even thought.
Right. A reminder in both of them of God's goodness and promise. Gene?
Well, there's something that I thought about that just brings up more questions. But they lived after the flood 300-400 years.
Right.
And each of his sons, even though the oldest son was 98 years old when they went on the ark. So they didn't have children prior to going on the ark.
That's right.
And they came off and lived 300-400 years, 600 years after that. Each of them only had 3-4 children.
Yeah, a couple of sons, a couple of children, daughters.
And they lived that long. They certainly, to the best of our knowledge, didn't know anything about birth control.
Right.
Why and how
don't know. But generationally, you could imagine that it would only take 2-3 generations before you had a massive amount of people. Yeah, but I don't know. And I don't know. That's one of those questions. That's you get to paradise before I do, and you can ask Shem or Japheth or if they're there. Why did you only have a couple of 3 or 4 kids, and why did you not have more? I don't know. I don't know why all that worked out that way. But there's a lot of things we don't know about the text. But I think if anything, we walk away at the end of our study saying Noah was an incredible person. He was a human being. He wasn't extraordinary in the sense that he had special powers to be what he was. He was just a man like us, but he applied himself to do God's will, and he's an incredible person. He's worthy of being studied and worthy of being emulated, and we should do that. And he should be a hero to us. And so I think hopefully now he is that. All right, so if you haven't grabbed a copy of the notes, we'll dismiss. Grab a copy of the Philippians notes. Do some studying on Philippians. I promise you, it's one of the most encouraging books of the New Testament. In fact, of the Bible, if you've ever been sad, you get discouraged, this is the book for you. So we'll study Philippians next. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.